How many technical errors were found in the film Armageddon by NASA scientists? What was the cause of the rift between star Bruce Willis and the director Michael Bay? Why did Steve Buscemi agree to play the role of Rockhound in Armageddon? If you don't know the answer to these questions, then these and more trivia will be answered in this episode of
Bad Look Cinema, the podcast.
I address you tonight, not as the President of the United States, not as the leader of a country, but as a citizen of humanity. We are faced with the very gravest of challenges. The Bible calls this day Armageddon, the end of all things. And yet, for the first time in the history of the planet, the species has the technology to prevent its own extinction. All of you praying with us need to know that everything that can be done to prevent this disaster is being called into service. The human thirst for excellence, knowledge, every step up the ladder of science, every adventurous reach into space, all of our combined modern technologies and imaginations, even the wars that we've fought have provided us the tools to wage this terrible battle. Through all of the chaos that is our history, through all of the wrongs and the discord, through all of the pain and suffering, through all of our times, there is one thing that has nourished our souls and elevated our species above its origins, and that is our courage. The dreams of an entire planet are focused tonight on those 14 brave souls traveling into the heavens. And may we all, citizens the world over, see these events through. Godspeed, and good luck to you. Hello, my name is Zoe. It's spelled Z-O or Z to the O for those of you outside of the U.S. Welcome back, friends. This is the 189th episode of Backlook Cinema, the podcast, where we take a look back at the movies of yesteryear, especially the movies of the latter half of the last millennium. If you like what you're about to hear, then please tell your family, tell your friends, and tell those 14 brave souls traveling into the heavens about Backlook Cinema, the podcast. When I first seen this movie in the theaters, I remember being blown away. I thought it was one of the best things that I have ever seen, and I remember watching it repeatedly when it was available on DVD or home video or whichever format that was available to watch it at home at the time. It was action-packed, it was funny, it was pulse-pounding, and even though the science didn't make any sense, I truly enjoyed this movie. And I couldn't wait to get around to talking about it on this podcast, to share it with you. My experience with this movie has been overall positive. It's got a chock full of actors that are fantastic. At the time, Bruce Willis was one of the greatest actors in the world, and he was heading up this movie, and it's filled with a bunch of other fantastic actors. And it was directed by one of the most bombastic directors in Hollywood, that being Michael Bay. And so this is my take on Armageddon. But that's a funny kind of word, isn't it? Armageddon. Like, where does it even come from? Why are we even saying it? Well, I took a trip down Wikipedia and some other sources. And from Wikipedia, this is what I found. Armageddon is a Greek transliteration of the Hebrew term Harmageddon. Har meaning a mountain or a range of hills, and Megiddo refers to a fortification made by King Ahab at the plain of Jezreel. The etymology of Megiddo remains unclear. It could mean assembly or place of crowns. Therefore, it has been suggested that Armageddon means mountain of assembly. There's no literal mountain called Megiddo at the plain of Jezreel, But there is a type of hill, it's called a tell, that was created by many generations of people living and rebuilding in the same spot or the same place. This place is also referred to as Tell Megiddo. In a modern context, Armageddon isn't a place, but a concept. That concept being a final devastating battle, the end of the world, the ultimate destruction, and it's this context from which the movie draws its title. So let's go to the opening credits of Armageddon, 1998. Carl is an amateur astronomer who's been looking to the stars all his life. He's been observing stars and charting the movements of the planets, comets, and asteroids for as long as he could remember. One fateful night, Carl does something that is the hope of every astronomer, amateur or professional. He finds something new in the sky. What he will later learn is that he's found the cause of the devastating meteor shower that had crippled several cities across the globe. What he'd found was a massive monster asteroid that had knocked several of its brethren out of their orbits and onto the planet Earth. What Carl had found was a rock the size of Texas on a direct collision course with his home world. Carl found a life killer, an asteroid that would extinguish almost all the life in the world with a single impact and cause a devastating nuclear winter. Carl found Armageddon, the end of all things. He had only one request. I want to name her Dottie after my wife. She's a vicious, life-sucking bitch from which there is no escape. And so it was that the meteor aiming for the destruction of life on planet Earth, the end of all the hopes and dreams of humanity, the cause of a wound from which there can be no healing, was henceforth known as Dottie. This movie was released July 1st, 1998, produced by Touchstone Pictures, Jerry Bruckheimer Films, and Valhalla Motion Pictures. It grossed over $201 million in the US and Canada, and over $553 million worldwide on a reported budget of $140 million. Now, to put that into perspective, that is adjusting for inflation, it would have grossed, had it been released today, almost $400 million, at around $397 million. And it would have grossed over $1 billion worldwide. And its budget would have been $277 million. And now that's a huge bet. That's a huge bet to spend $277 million on a movie. It's like you're really swinging for the fences. And they actually did it. They actually succeeded in what they're aiming for. And Hollywood is getting leery of taking those bets nowadays. $277 million in today's dollars is a huge bet. And in case of Armageddon, it was a $1 billion success. It actually grossed a little over $1 billion. So that's phenomenal. I don't know what they were expecting when they made this movie. I would chance to say that it exceeded expectations. So, yeah, that is phenomenal. So, this movie stars Bruce Willis as Harry S. Stamper. You may have seen him also in Die Hard, a movie I covered in episode 125, Pulp Fiction, The Sixth Sense, Looper, Red, or The Fifth Element. All of these happen to be some of my favorite movies. I love all of these movies. And what's interesting is the variety of movies that you will find Bruce Willis in. There's an action thriller, a quirky crime, a noir type film, a drama about ghosts, a time traveling sci-fi adventure, a spy thriller, a quirky sci-fi extravaganza, and he's been in so many movies. Now I know that in the last dozen years, a lot of his movies have been actually in the toilet, like just bad movies. And the reason for that is that he knew that he was coming down with a disease that was affecting the way his mind works. And he knew that he was not going to be able to work anymore. So he just got involved in as many projects as he possibly could, projects that would allow him to work as little as he needed to make as much money that he needed to make in order to secure a financial future for his family. It almost like he sacrificed himself for his family. And that's, there's something admirable about that. Billy Bob Thornton plays Dan Truman. He made a splash in the movie Sling Blade. And he's also appeared in A Simple Plan, The Man Who Wasn't There, Bandits, and many other great movies. Ben Affleck plays A.J. Frost. You may have seen him in Argo, Gone Girl, or the movie that made his career, Good Will Hunting. You know, as I go to the list, you will see that these people, not only have they been in incredible movies, but they're also huge stars. Like Liv Tyler, she plays Grace Stamper. You may have seen her in The Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring, The Incredible Hulk, or That Thing You Do. That Thing You Do, I believe, is my favorite Liv Tyler movie. Will Patton plays Charles Chick Chapel. You may have seen him in The Postman, No Way Out, or The Punisher from 2004. The Punisher is where I remember seeing him. Steve Buscemi plays Rockhound. He made a great appearance in Fargo. We covered that in episode 87 with Jen from My Streaming Bubble. That was a great collaboration. It was one of her favorite movies. And it was actually the first time I had seen that movie. I heard people talk about it and I had never seen it. And I'm glad she encouraged me to watch it. There's also Con Air that we covered in episode 6. I think there's a theory that the character he plays in Con Air is the same character that he plays in this movie. I don't buy it, but it's an interesting theory. And there's also Reservoir Dogs, which people give a lot of honor and homage to, especially for his part in being in that movie. William Fincher plays Colonel Willie Sharp, the Shuttle Freedom pilot. You may have seen him in Equilibrium, like I did, and I covered that movie in episode 94. Black Hawk Down, or Crash. That's funny. It's been such a long time I've seen Crash. I don't remember seeing him in it. Owen Wilson plays Oscar Choi. He's also been in The Royal Tenenbaums, Wedding Crashers, one of my favorite movies, or Behind Enemy Lines that I recently covered in episode 180. Michael Clark Duncan plays Bear. He's also been in The Scorpion King, Sin City, or Daredevil from 2003, where he made a fantastic Kingpin. Peter Stormare plays Lev Andropov. You know, it's funny, when I saw him, it's like he looked so familiar and it was kind of bothering me. Like every time I seen him, it's like, why do I know him? And that is because this is a much younger version of him. Well, actually, it seems like he was younger, but the next movie that I seen him in came out around the same time, so maybe he wasn't much younger. He looked really different. It seemed like the next movie that I saw him in, he seems much older. He looks so different, but at the same time, he looks exactly the same. So the next movie that I saw him in after I watched Armageddon was Constantine. And that is why he looks so familiar. And he plays the devil in Constantine. And I'm like, of course. He plays a fantastic, creepy person. And I think he was also in Fargo. He's also been in The Brothers Grimm and 22 Jump Street. Ken Hudson Campbell plays Max Leonard. He's also been in Groundhog's Day and Home Alone. Jessica Stern plays Jennifer Watts, the Shuttle Freedom co-pilot. She's been in Chaos and Left Behind 3, World at War. Keith David plays Lieutenant General Kemsley, and you may have heard his voice on The Princess and the Frog or seen him in American Fiction. He's an admirable actor, playing anyone from a pimp to a very serious general. He's amazing. Chris Ellis plays Walter Clark, the flight director, and he's been in Transformers 2007 and Apollo 13. And rounding up this mighty cast, I mean, there are a lot of other great actors, but this is as far as I'm going, is Jason Isaacs playing Ronald Quincy. He's been in The Patriot, but a lot of people know him from Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets. Directed by Michael Bay, who has also directed the aforementioned Transformers, The Rock, and he just recently did a documentary called We Are Storer. One of my favorite quirky films, Pain and Gain, and another one of my favorite films, Bad Boys. This movie was written by Jonathan Hensley, J.J. Abrams, and Tony Gilroy. This feels like an all-star writing team, because each one of these writers have written a plethora of fantastic films. For example, Hensley wrote The Ice Road, The Punisher from 2004, The Saint, and Die Hard with a Vengeance. Now, I know a lot of people probably didn't like The Punisher from 2004, or maybe they had a problem with The Saint, but I think I kind of like these movies. There's also Jeffrey Abrams, and you probably know his work from Regarding Henry, Star Wars Episode 7, The Force Awakens, Forever Young, or Mission Impossible 3. And I was looking through his IMDb. It would seem like he started off as just a screenwriter at first, and then he graduated to director. And I actually like a lot of his work. As a matter of fact, I think the only thing that I don't really like is the very last Star Wars film that he had happened to direct. And some of the choices he made, they were clumsy at best. I feel like, and I firmly believe, that if he had simply written and directed, or at least written, all three of the Star Wars movies, it would have been much more coherent, and it would have made much more sense. Or at the very least, get one director to do all three films instead of trying to get different directors for each film. I don't feel that worked out for this series, because you want a solid, cohesive story. You want something like The Lord of the Rings if you was going to finish out all three films or the entire franchise. You would want a singular vision in order to do that. And unfortunately, it wasn't done in the case of the Star Wars franchise. And then finally, we have Gilroy, and he wrote Rogue One, a Star Wars story. Speaking of franchises, he also wrote Michael Clayton, The Bourne Identity, speaking of another franchise, and The Devil's Advocate. The music was composed by Trevor Rabin, and within this movie, there's a hit song by Aerosmith. Rabin wrote music for Deep Blue Sea, National Treasure, Hot Rod, Gridiron Gang, Coach Carter, and many other films. And then Aerosmith performed one of the greatest songs of all time. And they made it for this film. And the song is called I Don't Want to Miss a Thing. It was written by Diane Warren and Aerosmith lead guitarist Joe Perry, who was uncredited, which is unusual because songwriting, unlike film writing, is like if you write a script for a film, you have to write a certain amount of the script in order to get credit on a film. If you could write like a whole script, and if somebody completely rewrites your script, there's a chance that your name may not appear on the credit. It depends on how much rewriting is done and how much of your original work is left on the film. Or there could be a half a dozen writers on a project, and maybe 3 of them or 4 of them will show up as credited on the film. And sometimes the other writers who worked on the film will get recredited as producers or contributors in some kind of way. Or maybe they won't get credit at all. But in songwriting, you could write 1 word on a song and you get credit. And that writing credit is important because you get residuals off your writing credit. And so I'm not sure about how much of the song Joe Perry wrote, but given that he helped create the song, he could have asked for credit, but either chose not to or was cheated out of it. I don't know. I didn't look too deeply into it. At any rate, this song was envisioned to be performed by somebody like Celine Dion. It was first supposed to be like a radio-only single from Armageddon, but due to popular demand, it was made commercially available in August 1998. It was Aerosmith's first and only #1 single on the Billboard Hot 100 chart in the US, and it reached #1 in Australia, Ireland, and Norway. Diane Warren said that she was inspired to write the song from a Barbara Walters interview when actor-producer James Brolin, father of Josh Brolin, commented that he missed his wife, Barbara Streisand, when they were sleeping or when they were asleep. And I thought, oh, isn't that special? So the other songs that Aerosmith contributed to the soundtrack are What Kind of Love Are You On? It was written by lead singer Steven Tyler and Joe Perry. Come Together by John Lennon and Paul McCartney. Aerosmith did a cover of that. And Sweet Emotion by Steven Tyler and the bassist Tom Hamilton. So that's all for the opening credits. As usual, please check out my shop at Bazaar de Alonzo. I'm sorry, that's not the shop. The shop is backlickcinema.com. And you can just look up backlickcinema.com/shop. And there are some t-shirts designs that I was overlooking. And I was like, oh yeah, I like these designs. It's like, I don't think of these designs when I am like perusing my own shop. I actually bought some more t-shirts for a friend of mine. And what was funny is that they had pointed out some designs that I had not remembered making. So I was like, yeah, that is a cool design, isn't it? So why don't you go to the shop and see what's available? Because they're not all simply pertaining to the podcast. I'm kind of just throwing any old designs at that shop. So check out the shop and see what's going on. And then there's also Bazaar de Alonzo. That's still not up yet, but it's a work in progress. And that's it for the announcements. Now let's check out our favorite parts. Now, as for the themes for this movie, I think it's mostly like hope against hope. You know, it's themes of scientific excellence or specializations in the field. But a lot of it is trust me, bro. It's got a trust me, bro feel. Like, I feel this thing is going to work. Just trust me on this. It's like, I've been doing this for 19 years. Trust me. I know what I'm doing. There's a lot of that going on. It's a lot of a theme of specialization or expertise or honoring the work that somebody has done or giving homage to the people who understand their work, who are experts in their field. That's the vibe that I'm getting off of this movie. It's a strong vibe there. Also, there's also familial connection. There's also the notion of whatever can go wrong will go wrong. But this movie wouldn't be interesting if not every single thing had gone wrong on the way to accomplishing their goals. It also had the motto ad astra per aspera. It was on a plaque and it was prominently featured in one of the scenes. And that is Latin for through hardships to the stars. I think the first time I really understood that phrase was when I was watching an episode of Star Trek, Strange New Worlds, and that theme had featured prominently in that episode. So I think that that's also one of the main themes of the movie, ad astra per aspera. One of my favorite scenes was the very beginning of the movie. So at the very beginning of the movie, it starts off with a meteor shower. And this is like a meteor shower from hell, even though it's coming from the heavens. It's like God is angry and he just starts throwing rocks at the earth. And it's like this wanton destruction. There's like destruction everywhere. It's like, it starts off with this funny bit by Eddie Griffin, a comedian, basically just doing his best Eddie Griffin, right? Because if you're familiar with Eddie Griffin's comedy, he has a certain style. So he was really putting forth his Eddie Griffiness, and he had this dog, and they're going through the city, and it was so fantastic that that scene, the way it starts off with him, and then the dog, and then these meteors just coming from space and just smashing everything and causing all types of death and destruction and screaming, and really no way to escape because they're coming from everywhere and they're blowing holes in buildings. And there's also like a chilling scene where you see the damaged towers, the twin towers in New York City, and blowing holes in those. And the meteor shower was causing damage to various cities around the world because it seemed that the earth was being hit on the day side, or on any city that was on the day side of the earth was getting it. And it was getting hit, it was getting waxed, it was causing major destruction. And the way it was framed, the way it was filmed, it was just fantastic and thrilling. It just really set the stakes for the movie, and it was just so exciting, and it really drew me into the film. It really engaged me. It's like, you're about to see something fantastic, here's a taste, and that's what I got from the beginning of the movie. I also like the quick pace of the movie. It just kept moving right along. I think the movie is almost 2.5 hours, and you don't feel it at all. It's like it moves really quickly. Let me double check the film time. Yeah, 2 hours, 26 minutes. It does not feel like it. It just moves. And I really appreciate that. If you're going to have a long movie, make sure it's moving right along. I don't want to feel a minute of an hour and 26 minutes. And you don't. And you don't in this movie. They have a fantastic training montage. I love a good montage. I don't know what it is. And I shouldn't like montages, but when you see a well done montage, it just gives you all of the feels. And this particular montage, it's like they're training. And so you have them talking to psychiatrists. You have them doing underwater exercises, just all kinds of training, all weird things that astronauts have to do to get ready for space, because they're training oil drillers to go into space to drill a hole, because they can't train the astronauts to do it. Now, you might question the logic, and believe me, a lot of people have, but once you accept or really ignore the premise of the film, it's absolutely thrilling. Like, never mind that it probably be easier to teach astronauts how to drill. It's still fun. Another great scene, one of my favorite scenes, is the animal cracker scene. So I think this is the first time that you hear the Aerosmith theme, I Don't Want to Miss a Thing. And it's a very moving scene, and then they start to play the music behind it. It's just masterfully done. And Ben Affleck and Liv Tyler, they do a fantastic job on that scene. It's just incredibly moving. This is before they get sent off to space, and they have a lot of incredibly moving scenes in this movie. And I get that there are probably a lot of people that aren't moved by these scenes, but I get emotional at certain points. So I'm susceptible to some of these scenes. So they may not work on everybody, but they certainly work on me. And this was one of those scenes. And it was interesting because throughout the film is like they're showing shots of Liv Tyler and her character, and she's not saying anything, but it's just the emotion that she's going through, and kind of reminding the audience of, that the oil driller / astronauts are in space, and they are in a lot of peril, and some of them have probably died, and they'll show shots of her at mission control going through the emotion of having her loved ones in space. Because it's not just her father or her boyfriend / fiance. It's really every one of the oil drillers, because she grew up with them. They were all her older uncles or older brothers. So she accepts all of them as family. And you can see her carry that emotional weight throughout the entire movie. I also like the narrow refuel escape. That was fantastic, because the space shuttles, they launched 2 space shuttles, and apparently these were actual space shuttle launches, and they get into near Earth orbit, and their mission is to refuel at the Russian space station and then continue to the moon. Then they'll slingshot around the moon, generate enough speed to catch up to the asteroid from behind, and then land on the asteroid, and then get out and drill a hole, throw down some nukes, and then take off. They launched 2 space shuttles as a redundant plan. So like if one of the shuttles fail, or one of the drills fell, or something, if something happens, then they have a backup. So that's why they launched 2 shuttles simultaneously. So they're docked at the Russian space station, and it's old. It's only got 1 cosmonaut at the station, and he's been alone by himself for a long time. So he's not mentally all there. He's very quirky and goofy, and and the equipment is old and it doesn't want to work right. So naturally, in their refueling of the space shuttles with this very dangerous fuel, disaster strikes because of equipment failure, and then there's a fire, and now everybody has to get out of the space station quick, fast, and in a hurry. And then there's a lot of shouting, a lot of screaming, a lot of running, and then maybe leaving somebody behind. And you have AJ, played by Ben Affleck, and he's trapped in one of the compartments where the fuel is. Where he was supposed to control the flow of the fuel, but the arm broke. The lever that was supposed to be his like emergency shut off for the fuel, that broke, and now AJ is trapped in the fuel compartment. And so he and the cosmonaut, well, actually both he and the cosmonaut end up getting trapped in there, and the cosmonaut has to, find a way out other than the main door. So they jimmy their way out. Then they have to run to the shuttles and get on the shuttle before they take off, because the shuttles are about to take off without them. So that was a thrilling escape. Is it realistic? Of course not. But that didn't tamper my enjoyment. It's best not to watch this if you're a scientist, or if you're an astrophysics major, if you're an engineer. It's probably not good for you. You're going to be very upset. But for the lay people who don't know anything about this stuff, it's absolutely thrilling. Steve Buscemi as Rockhound. Rockhound is one of my favorite characters. He's quirky, he's sleazy. He has a lot of the best scenes, and they're good because he's in it, because he knows how to play certain types of characters. And when they found out that they had Steve Buscemi, they made sure that they got the version of Steve Buscemi that they wanted. And I think that's why there's a theory that his character in not The Rock, but his character in Con Air and the character in this movie are the same character or the same person, because they're very similar. They're very similar people, and they have similar proclivities, I should say. So my favorite of the Rockhound scenes is when Rockhound goes crazy. He gets space dementia. Even when I saw this film for the first time, was the goofiest sounding thing that I have ever heard. And I questioned its authenticity. But that's what they called it, space dementia. And Rockhound had caught it. He was, at first, it's like there were signs that he was getting it, because after they brought the nuclear weapon off of the space shuttle, he was riding it like a pony. And the Colonel Sharp, had to tell him, please get off of the nuclear weapon. I think he actually used 3 syllables. I think he actually said nuclear. Okay, he had to emphasize that he did not want anybody sitting on a weapon. And, Steve gets all upset because it's like, you won't let me have any fun. And he was actually drawing inspiration from the scene of, I forgot the name of a movie, but there's a movie where there's a guy, he's riding a rocket at World War III, and he's riding the rocket all the way down from where it had launched to where it's supposed to explode from. And it's a black and white movie. I wish I remember the name, but I can't. So that's the scene that Steve Buscemi, it could have been ad-lib, but that was where Rockhound had gotten inspiration to sit on a nuclear missile and ride it like a pony. Anyways, that was funny. Actually, that was just the beginning of it, though. That he had gotten a hold of this minigun. The minigun was mounted on a tripod, but it wasn't the type of gun where you get behind it and you press the trigger. It was a kind of remote control where wherever you turned your head, that's where the gun was aiming. So he was turning his head and looking at stuff and then pressing the trigger and just blowing stuff up with it. And to the point where he's almost blowing up his fellow astronauts, his fellow oil drillers, and they basically had to tackle him to get him off of the minigun. And then later on, you see him, he's tied up with duct tape inside of the space shuttle so that he won't cause any more problems. And it was when he was at the minigun that it was pronounced that he had space dementia. But thankfully, later on, near the end of the movie, he was fine. He was okay. And, they're the heroes because they saved the day. And he told his fellow oil drillers, it's like, we're heroes now. So no need to mention the thing with the minigun. Also, one of my favorite parts, and this is one of my last favorite parts of the movie. This is really the end of the movie. I mean, there are lots of stuff that had happened, and I'm sure that I skipped over a lot of parts that people loved about this film. But I'm just going over the parts that I really liked. That it was hard to take notes during this movie, because I'm so invested in the movie that I'm probably not taking notes like I should. Probably should have watched it twice, but I don't have time for it. But so it's almost like I had to do a speed run through the movie. So this part is it basically had me emotionally invested. And so this is when, I guess it's kind of like a two-parter. So this is when Harry has had problems with AJ making moves on his daughter. His daughter is played by Liv Tyler, Grace Stamper. So he's not happy about AJ making moves on Grace, and he let his feelings be known by shooting at AJ with a shotgun full of rock salt, or something that won't kill him but would really hurt him. And he's always kind of telling AJ to stay away from her, and he's telling her to stay away from AJ because he thinks his daughter is better than any of the people that work on an oil drill. Like, she's been to college, she speaks Japanese, she works for the company, but she's more like an executive. She's not, out there on an oil rig drilling for oil. But it's not like Harry can keep his daughter away from whoever she chooses to love. So near the end of the movie, Stamper basically reconciles with AJ. AJ was going to sacrifice himself to save the world because there's something wrong with the nuke where it won't go off. So somebody has to stay behind and physically press the button to set the nuke off to save the world. And AJ is chosen to do it. They draw straws. AJ draws the shortest straw. And he's determined to go out and, fulfill his mission, like do his job and fulfill his mission. But on his way down, he gets ambushed by Harry. And basically Harry pulls his oxygen supply just before they fully leave the ship. And he forces AJ back on the ship. And he says, AJ is like, you can't do this to me. This is my job. You got to let me do my job. And Stamper says, your job is to take care of my little girl now. Now I got to do this. And that I felt that emotion. I felt that emotion in that part. And then just before he sets the bomb off, he goes and he talks to his daughter. And he had promised his daughter that he was coming back home, but he's told her that he was going to have to break that promise and that he wants her to take care of AJ. And basically they say their goodbyes. And that was also a very emotional part. And people might deride this film for just being like, just an action junkie film, but there is just enough emotional weight that makes this film incredibly enjoyable. So at least for me, and I really carry that with me. I really, because even after seeing it multiple times, that part at the end, it almost always gets me. And then there's a thing where, like I mentioned, that there is a lot of, like, there's a theme of like, trust me, bro. Like, there's a lot of that going on. So there's a thing where Harry doesn't really trust AJ because AJ won't listen to him. Like, he'll tell AJ to do a job, or he'll tell AJ not to do something. AJ would do anyway, cause a huge mess. There was a training exercise where they were training on using a drill, and there was like a drill that was getting hot or whatever, and they told AJ to pull back on the drill or he was going to blow the transmission. And this is just a training exercise. They weren't actually using the drill, but they were operating the drill, but it wasn't digging anywhere. And AJ says, no, you got to trust me. I know this drill. You got to trust me. And the computer simulation decided that the transmission failed. And so because AJ didn't back off, the transmission failed, and they basically failed that exercise. And so AJ, he's upset. He's like, the computer doesn't know. The computer doesn't understand. This is your drill, Harry. You have to understand that I know this drill as well as you do. You know it can take it. You know this drill can do the job. And so a similar scene happens when they're actually on the asteroid, where Max was in the drilling an asteroid, and the asteroid hits a gas pocket. He hits a gas pocket in the asteroid or something, and it blows up, and it blows Max's vehicle and thus the drill into outer space, and he is lost. But then AJ comes, and with his drill, he had escaped his own disaster, and he arrives at the site in his vehicle with his drill, and they set him up to dig to finish drilling the hole, and he starts drilling, and he's digging, and Stamper is telling him, you got to back off because the drill is redlining or whatever the drill's doing, and AJ is like, no, you got to trust me. It can take it. We can punch through. You got to trust me. And so apparently for the first time, Stamper trusts AJ, even though there's really nothing in the movie that says that we should trust AJ. And I feel like for the first time in his life, AJ is correct, and they punch through, and they get to the depth that they was aiming for without anything blowing up. So there's a lot of those types of things in the movie going on. A lot of trust me, bro. So that might give some people some consternation. But I had an overall joy with the rewatch of this film. So what was your favorite parts? What did you like? Let me know in the comments if you're listening to this on Facebook, or if you're not, then let me know on the email. I'll let you know what the email address is at the end of the show. That's it for our favorite parts. And now let's take a look at our top 10 trivia. The trivia top 10, I got almost all of these from IMDb. And actually, before I start with trivia, there was one more thing that I wanted to point out. NASA's Planetary Defense Coordination Office is in charge of tracking asteroids that are a threat to Earth. According to astronomy.com, the White House proposed a 2026 NASA budget calls for a dramatic 26% cut to funding, reducing NASA's budget from $24 billion to $18.8 billion. All I'm going to say is that kind of sucks for killer asteroid detection. So keep that in mind as NASA is able to do less and less. More and more of their missions are getting canceled. And we find ourselves with a less capable science and overall. Like a lot of science funding is getting cut. And a government or a country that was the lead in science innovation will now start to fall behind. And that's what's kind of going on right now, and it is affecting NASA in a very negative way. Hopefully, it won't be a situation where there's a killer asteroid out there that NASA misses because they don't have the budget to watch the skies. I mean, already they're dealing with a slim budget, but now it's slimmer than ever. So let's hope that this won't affect us too negatively. So continuing with the trivia, NASA shows this film during their management training program. The new managers are given the task of trying to spot as many errors as possible. At least 168 have been found. Regarding the film's premise, Ben Affleck asked director Michael Bay, wouldn't it be easier for NASA to train astronauts how to drill rather than training oil drillers how to be astronauts? Bay told Affleck to shut the fuck up. However, the reasoning behind sending the drillers rather than training astronauts is actually addressed in the movie. When Harry is initially summoned to NASA, it was with the intention of helping him to prepare real astronauts to do the drilling. It is not until he explains that the job is too complex and unpredictable for him to teach others in a few weeks what he learned over several decades that they start to consider training real oil drillers to become astronauts. However, Commenting on this dialogue in the audio commentary, Affleck states that he does not buy that reasoning. And I understand, because especially since I feel that it would take just as long to train an oil driller to become an astronaut as it might take for an astronaut to become an oil driller. It seems to me. I think if this movie was written differently and they had like a few years in order to prepare for the asteroid rather than a few months. I think it wasn't even a few months. I think it was a few weeks to prepare for an asteroid. They could have done a more realistic scenario, but this was a quick paced movie and everything had to happen like right now because the asteroid's coming. But with the timetable they was working with, you really have to suspend your disbelief on the things that they were able to accomplish. Up next, because of the patriotic nature of the script and the success of using Top Gun starring Tom Cruise as recruitment material, the producers persuaded NASA to allow director Michael Bay and company to shoot in the normally restricted space agency. This included the Neutral Buoyancy Lab, a 65 million gallon, 40-foot deep pool used to train astronauts for weightlessness, and the use of two $10 million spacesuits. The crew was also allowed to shoot in the historic launch pad that went out of service after the Apollo 1 disaster, and parts of the movie were filmed at Edwards Air Force Base in California. Bruce Willis said he did not care for Michael Bay's directing style, and he refused to work with him again. Specifically, Willis did not like how Bay emphasized spectacle over the character-building moments that had been left on the cutting room floor. He also complained about the poor working conditions, and Willis was not amused by all the screaming that Michael Bay did on set. When asked why he did this film, Steve Buscemi replied, "I wanted a bigger house," which is understandable. Buscemi claimed that the role of Rockhound was pitched to him as a heroic geologist, which he eagerly accepted, wanting to change from the lowlifes as whom he had been typecast. He noted that after he had been cast in the role, Rockhound's sleazy characteristics were written into the script. I think what happened was the writers realized that they had Steve Buscemi, so they was like, well, we're gonna make it more like Steve Buscemi. I shouldn't say it like that. I should say that we should make it more like the characters that he usually plays. So yes, he's still a genius, but he's a genius with a slimy personality, which ironically was something he was trying to get away from. Rockhound's line about sitting on 1 million pounds of fuel and a rocket built by the lowest bidder is a variation of an actual radio transmission by Mercury astronaut Alan Shepard just prior to liftoff. So that's amazing. That was something that was inspired by an actual astronaut. Bruce Willis came to the film after he decided a comedy that he was filming called Broadway Baller could not be salvaged and sought a way to exit the project. Disney's then head, Joe Roth, worked out a deal where Willis would star in Armageddon and 2 feature films for the studio. In exchange, Disney would absorb the failed project's costs as an advance against his initial salary. The 2 films Willis later made under this deal were The Sixth Sense and Unbreakable. So he really came out on top of that deal. He really, it would have been one thing if he had did 2 stinkers, but instead he did 2 well-renowned films. I'm not sure how much Unbreakable made, but The Sixth Sense made a lot of money, so Disney definitely got its money back. Michael Bay had the actors write their list of demands on paper, from which Bruce Willis read. So I guess the writers, the actors were writing as their characters. So based on what the characters are asking for, the actors knew their characters well, which is something I really liked about it. So for example, Chick, played by Will Paxton, he wanted a full week's Emperor's package at Caesar's Palace. And in one of the montages where they show the guys taking a day off to relax, basically it was a day off before the actual launch because Stamper had wanted to relax his guys because there was a lot of tension building up. So he wanted to give them one day to relax. One day, basically their last day on Earth, because he knew that this was a dangerous mission and some of them might not come back from it. So this last day on Earth where they can just really enjoy life. So in the montage, you see Chick, he's gambling because that's his happy place. He's at a casino gambling. Yeah, Max Leonard, he wants to bring back. Well, actually, no, I'm misremembering. It's there are two montages where the crew is relaxing. The first one is after they get off the oil rig. They get off the oil rig and they have some days off from the oil rig, and I think that's where you see Chick at Caesar's Palace. And then Max Leonard, played by Ken Hudson Campbell, he wants to bring back 8-track tapes, and which is kind of unlikely, but that's what he wants. Bear, played by Michael Clark Duncan, wants to stay at the Lincoln bedroom of the White House, the Lincoln bedroom at the White House for the summer. Oscar, played by Owen Wilson, wants parking tickets wiped off his record. He has 56 tickets in 7 states. Noonan, played by Clark Heathcliff Broly, he has 2 women friends that he'd like made naturalized U.S. citizens. No questions asked. They also, it was like a general question from all the guys, not any one guy in particular, but they, at one point Stamper asked, you wouldn't know who killed Kennedy. And I presume they're talking about John F. Kennedy. And then from all the guys, particularly Rockhound, no taxes ever. And like ever, no taxes for the rest of our lives. And so those were the list of demands they wanted from engaging in this incredibly dangerous venture. And finally, the film crew was also allowed to shoot sequences at the top of a real launch pad with an actual space shuttle docked to it. The only condition was that they not step into the shuttle itself. Ben Affleck admitted to stepping inside the orbiter for a brief moment before NASA technicians ordered him out of the spacecraft. That's funny. Some people just couldn't resist. That's it for the trivia. And up next is the critics' thoughts. The critics has this at 43%. The audience on Rotten Tomatoes has it at 73%, which is a crazy discrepancy. It seems the audience liked it way better than the critics. And on IMDb reviews, it's at 6.7 out of 10. And that's closer in line with the audience score on Rotten Tomatoes. Matthew Rossa from Salon.com wrote, Armageddon's animus towards scientists and science runs so deep that on an intuitive level, a viewer could be forgiven for thinking that the mistakes are somehow connected to an anti-intellectual prejudice. And I don't think this is the case. The thing is that the average audience moviegoer, they're not going to know so much about science to be offended by how non-sciencey that this movie is. Yeah, a lot of this is just pretending. And for most people in the audience, they're not going to know. The science in Star Trek is just as fake as the science in Armageddon. So, and we all love Star Trek. Steve Parcell from the Tampa Bay Times wrote, a boys with toys extravaganza dripping with testosterone and male bonding. It grabs moviegoers by the collar and bullies us into having a good time. I think that's about right. At least that's the way I felt. Was I quite bullied? Maybe I was bullied. Paul Burns from Sydney Morning Herald wrote, Michael Bay, directing his third film for Bruckheimer, knows what the boss wants and supplies it. Though he's probably capable of better, both men came to the film via Madison Avenue, and what they're seeing here is just another project. I don't quite agree with this assessment, because there is a strong emotional component to it. And Michael Bay, his style is like an MTV style, because I think he started off as a music video director. So not quite Madison Avenue. And as a music video director, that was one of the complaints that Bruce Willis has. So I can understand, like Paul Barnes is not alone in this assessment. Bruce Willis did not appreciate this MTV style of editing, this MTV style of movie. He wanted more character building moments, and a lot of that got cut out. And that's one of the things that he was upset about. But I maintain that there's enough emotional weight where it's not just a bunch of numbers. At last, we have Margaret Pomerantz from sbs.com.au. She wrote, I laughed. I didn't cry one tear, even though I suspected I was supposed to at one point, and I felt like I'd had a terrific time at the movies by the end. It's entertainment, pure and fairly simple. Finally, Armageddon is, as of this recording, available on AMC+. My next episode is yet another classic space adventure, but this time it's a cult classic. I've been sort of dreading this film and wanting to talk about it for a long time, because I'm still not sure that I get it. And I'm not even sure if I've ever watched the whole thing from beginning to end. And in spite of all of that, I can't stop thinking about it. Join me next time and we'll explore the quirky sci-fi flick, The Adventures of Buckaroo Banzai Across the Eighth Dimension. You can follow us on Blue Sky, Threads, TikTok, Instagram, and sometimes Twitter. Please contact us with any questions, comments, or suggestions at fanmail@backlickcinema.com. Please rate and review on your favorite podcast app. And if you're listening on YouTube, please like or subscribe or leave a comment below. I'd love to hear from you. One last time, if you like this show, then please help us grow by spreading the word about Backlick Cinema, the podcast. Believe me, it matters. I've been Zoe Richardson. Be safe, share a movie from yesteryear with your family, hug your loved ones, and if you're going to be anything, be outstanding.